Hey guys, it's Will here, and I'm here today to talk to you about my initial thoughts on the Death for the Skies supplement, the new additions to the flyer rules for Warhammer 40k. Now, I don't actually own a copy of the book yet. I have had a chance to have a brief look at it and some leaked images online as well. And so really to inform this video, I've been looking at a lot of other people's videos, and what I've not been trying to do is sort of get their opinions, but really sort of dig up the facts about what's in the book, how it affects the flyer rules, and then sort of from what I've been able to find out, form my own opinions on that. Yeah, I just want to thank a couple of people who had some really good videos on their YouTube channel about this. The guys at the Long War over in America, really good, very long video on that, and also Mini Wargaming in Canada had a good video about it and put some back reps up using the rules. And another YouTuber, I think this one's in the UK, a guy called Winters SEO. He had a good sort of chat about that and a review of it. So yeah, these guys have been very helpful, although they don't know it, in giving me the information I need to form the opinions in this video. So yeah, let's see what's actually going on with this then. So the first thing is, it says it replaces the flyer rules in the rulebook. Now, from what I understand for that, and what everybody else who I've talked to about it, seen talk about it, etc., seems to interpret that as, is that means these rules are basically compulsory. I mean, obviously, if you're playing with a small group of mates, you can play whatever rules you want. You can, play third ed with your brother in your basement if you like. That's totally cool, and but for meeting up with people in your local gaming club, people you don't know very well, or people you just met on that night, for going to tournaments, obviously you're going to want to know what the current rules are, and this seems to be an update to those rules, and something that GW are certainly expecting that we'll all adopt, which actually really gets on my nerves. I was hoping that this was going to be something like Escalation or Planet Strike, Cities of Death, something like that, that was like an optional extra way to play the game. You want to have a battle where flyers are a bigger part of it, then, sure, do this for a fun game, but they seem to be making us buy it. And yeah, that's a bit of a bum, because it means everyone who wants to use a flyer in any kind of anything other than the most house ruled of metagames is going to need to buy this book, and that's £35 from everybody who owns a flyer. Now, you can get a little bit cheaper. The cheapest I've found it is 28 quid, but that's still, that's a sizable chunk of money, and I don't think people are going to end up spending more money at GW because of this. I think people are just going to buy that instead of what they were going to buy. So it's a bit like, yeah, you're not really helping anyone there, GW. You're charging us a sizable chunk of money for a small tweak to the rules. And then with the rumours of 8th edition on the horizon, possibly autumn this year, so what, 6 months? So you're going to charge me £30 for a hardback book that I'm only going to use for 6 months, and then it gets scrapped and replaced with whatever new book you're trying to sell me for 50 quid only 2 years after they reprinted it. Seriously, guys, this is it's getting on my nerves. 7th edition as it is actually really good. Some of the codexes need rebalancing, but the core game doesn't, and GW should be focusing their efforts, I think personally, on rebalancing some of the weaker codexes, things like Chaos, Orcs, definitely Tyranids. Maybe even, how about this for an idea, get a physical hard copy codex for Adaptus Sororitas? Maybe? No, let's bring out a book that's even more expensive than the codex, just to tweak some flyer rules that nobody really thought needed tweaking anyway. So yeah, I'm not impressed with that. And if I can avoid getting it, through whatever circumstances, I may try and dodge having to buy these rules, because I know a lot of them are just going to be in the 8th ed rulebook when it comes out in supposedly 6 months time. So yeah, but anyway, rant over. Going to actually have a look at what the rules are saying. So the first thing is this dogfight phase. Now this actually sounds kind of cool. It looks like it could be a nice bit of fun. You've got your flyers, you kind of do a 3-stage rock paper scissors, but it's not actual rock, paper, scissors. You pick 1, 2 or 3 on a dice that you conceal and then show your opponent, and they show you what they've picked. So sort of to represent the planes jinking and dodging and diving, and that actually sounds pretty fun, you know, for a casual game, or for, you know, a game where you're trying to focus more on flyers, particularly if you're someone who kind of likes that sort of thing, then yeah, that could be quite fun. But there's a couple of issues with it. Firstly, it's adding a whole extra phase to the game, and we just got a whole new phase. We got the whole psychic phase thing. So, you know, we've gone from a 3-phase game to a 4-phase game. Hey, let's make it 5. Hell, why not come up with a 6th phase and then double the amount of time it takes to play a game? Oh, and breathe. So yeah, and also it seems to need extra space as well. I mean, in theory, you could probably wangle it on the sideboard half the distances, or even, you know, even quarter the distances. But well, I suppose the flyers would start bumping into each other too much then, I don't know. But yeah, it just seems to be extra time and extra space. Excuse me. Now, in terms of balance, it is kind of balanced, you know, fighters and bombers and attackers, the new roles they've introduced for flyers, have various strengths or weaknesses against each other, but there is this chance that your flyers could get killed before they even come on the board. Now, admittedly, you also have the chance to do that to your opponent, so with flyers that are just shooting, or bomb, you know, just dropping bombs, they've got a chance. They can shoot each other down, but you can shoot them down, so it balances. But the real nerf here is for transport flyers. Now, this is speaking as someone who just, like a week before this dropped, brought a Storm Raven. I spent however much a Storm Raven is to add one of those to my army. So this is a 200 point model, and then I want to put some Stern Guard in. So you're really looking at 150 points there, and then hang a minimum of 100 point Dreadnought off the back of it. So quick bit of maths, that's 450 points. It's already starting off the board, but that kind of balances with what it's going to do when it's going to deep strike down in the Ravenhawk assault group. But yeah, now it could get shot down, and I never actually get to play with those 450 points. That's a bit harsh. I'm not liking that. I do not like the idea that my models might get shot down off the board before they've even had a chance to enter play. So yeah, I think the dogfighting between, you know, your fighters and your attackers, you know, you've got a couple of Storm Talons going up against, I don't know, some Nephilim jet fighters. That's a bad example. Who runs Dark Angel flyers? A couple of, I don't know, Dark Eldar Razor Wings. That could be quite cool. But the, you know, the idea that my big transport might just not make it on is a bit of a not happy. So what about the other new rules? So they've done some sort of overall changes to the flyer rules, and there's a few of these that are some basic clarifications or slight adjustments just to make sense. Like obviously a zooming flyer can't make use of cover, you know, although they may only be physically on the table at the same height as your building, they're actually meant to be flying up here. So, you know, you can't hide behind a building in a jet fighter. That's just the way it is. And hover mode being allowed on the come in, that's all cool. But there's a few nerfs to the shooting. Basically, as I understand it, fighters now are the only ones that can have Skyfire, and they get -1 to shoot against ground targets. So, your example, your Crimson Hunter is now now going to be -1 to hit ground targets. And that's defined as basically anything that's not a flyer, a skimmer, a jet bike, a flying monstrous creature, etc. So that's a bit of a nuisance for those type of things. And then your non-attack fighters, things like the Storm Talon, the Storm Raven, the Sunshark Bomber, all of these that aren't fighters, they're either considered attackers or bombers. They don't get Skyfire, so all those guns on your Storm Raven that used to be a great way to keep enemy flyers at bay, yeah, they don't have Skyfire now, but they don't have the -1 to ground targets. So on the whole, those kind of nerf flyers a little bit, although they do get a slight manoeuvrability bonus with the new break turns, which is varied model to model. They've got 2 new stats, agility and pursuit, and you have to take an agility test, and you can do an extra 90-degree turn at any point in your movement. So that's kind of cool. That gives them a little more manoeuvrability, but then they've not got the same flexibility of targets. This, of course, being if they even make it to the board because they didn't get shot down before they turned up. Okay, I've got some notes here. What else was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, the data sheets. Now, this is another thing that bugs me about this book. They've got, I think it's 23 data sheets for flyers printed in there. That's cool, that's a lot of content, except 21 of those are simply reprints of data sheets that are already in the relevant codexes. So you've got 2 new data sheets, and the others, there's no changes in stats, no changes in points values, no changes in options apart from some slight wording with being able to make them into squadrons or flyer wings. They're not true squadrons. Yeah, the only thing they've changed is they've added the role, so attacker, bomber or fighter, and also the new stats, so agility and pursuit, which are single digit numbers. So why did we need to waste 20 pages of, you know, nice quality paper to print that on when you could have printed 1 page with a nice little list of them? You know, Storm Talon, Storm Raven, Dakajet, just, you know, list that out like that. You know, reduce the cost of your book, which, like I said before, isn't going to mean people are going to, you know, it's not going to be extra money for having a more expensive book to GW, because people are just going to take it out of what they'd have spent on models, because most of us don't have unlimited disposable income. We have other things we need to spend our money on. So we're not going to give GW more of our money, we're simply going to spend money we have on something different. So yeah, that's a bit of a pain. They did have the 2 new flyers in there, which is cool. Haven't had a chance to analyse the rules in too much depth. It looks like the Orc one has got these custom mega cannons and smasher guns. It looks kind of wacky and very big mech flavoured. And then Space Marines get a fighter, because now the Storm Talon can't act as a fighter because it's been classified as an attacker. They needed a fighter because Space Marines have got to have something of everything. So that's cool. And the models do look really nice, I have to say. You know, for all my ranting about costs and rules, the flyer models themselves actually look really nice. So you know, certainly would be worth picking this book up if you just really want to use those core models. Okay, the final big change is these there's air superiority as well. Basically, you can affect reserves by having a higher number of flyers. So if you've got more flyers than your opponent, or more flyers in reserve than your opponent, you can add or subtract 1 from your reserve rolls, and your opponent has to subtract 1. So it's kind of nice. It gives you a good reason to bring your flyers. There is some question from the way it's worded. It says in the dogfight phase, but the dogfight only occurs if there's flyers. So if one side doesn't have flyers, then there's no dogfight phase. So does that mean the air superiority rule doesn't happen, or does that mean the guy who's got flyers in reserves automatically has air superiority? It's interesting. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. There's a few things like this in the book where it's a bit, could really do with an FAQ there, guys. So the final thing is about these new flyer wings, which are essentially ways to take a formation of flyers. They're not like a squadron, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out, but basically you buy a group of flyers. And they can have a wing leader who gets bonuses, so it's effectively a sergeant, and they can form up in these attack patterns, which are very specific configurations that will give you bonuses. So like if you've got your 2 flyers flying side by side, you can get a bonus. You've got 3 flyers flying in a triangle, you get a different bonus, etc. And these look cool, and you know, a nice sort of interesting way to represent how military planes can kind of fly in formation and get bonuses for that formation flying. So that's nice, and it does give flyers a boost, but it's a boost that's very much dependent on having a good number of flyers. Obviously, 1, you can't have a formation because you're just 1. 2 of them, you're very limited in what formations you can do, and they're only fairly minor bonuses. when you start having 3 or even 4 flyers on the board, then it really starts to make a difference, and these get some really good bonuses potentially, like a 4+ invuln save or something like that for flying 4 in a square shape. So yeah, I think, you know, that gives big groups of flyers a nice boost. And I don't think these formations have to be all the same. No, I think they do have to be all the same unless there's certain data sheets for kind of set formations, like the Space Marine one that's 2 Storm Talons and 2 Storm Hawks. That's the one, Storm Hawk. So yeah, that's interesting. It certainly counterbalances the slight loss in damage output from flyers from the other changes to the rules. So I guess that brings the question, overall, with these rules, under these rules, how do flyers stack up? So you've got your dogfight phase, pretty balanced between flyers, but a slight nerf to transports. You've got the attack patterns, they're obviously a boost, and it's a bigger boost the more you take. The new sort of general changes to the rules, we've got a bit of a nerf to the flexibility and damage output of your flyers, but a slight increase to manoeuvrability. And then air superiority can make your reserves more or less reliable depending on who has it, so that probably balances out on the whole depending on the details of your list. So overall, I think flyers are about as useful as where they were. I've had some things not quite so good, some things a little bit better. I think though, what you'll see under these rules is people who take flyers, you know, flyers will get taken about as often, but when you see them, it won't be like the odd 1 or 2 here. And I think transports are going to be less valuable. I mean, they already aren't the most competitive thing, apart from Necron Scythes, because they completely just ignore all the rules when it comes to being a transport flyer, and you can't shoot the squad out of them, they'll just be able to walk on. So that's cool. But yeah, I think you won't see the odd flyer, you'll see either no flyers or big groups of flyers under these rules, because a single flyer doesn't have the wing, the flyer wing bonuses, but it does have the nerfs to the shooting. So I think people, if they're going to take flyers, are probably going to take 2 to 3, possibly even 4. You know, I don't think people will run single flyers, and even just 2 isn't really going to be optimal anymore. That's certainly how I see it anyway. If I've missed something glaringly obvious in this, then by all means let me know down there in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what other people are thinking about this. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is how these rules are going to interact with the tournament scene. Sorry, getting a bit dry there. So the first thing is how compulsory really are these. You know, is it going to be that every tournament, you know, these are the rules and that's what we're going to do, or are tournament organisers going to say no, that's not, you know, not part of the rules for this tournament? I don't know, I'm not a tournament organiser, I'll have to see what they do, but there's a few possible reasons why they might not want to, even though it is maybe the official rules now. And the first one is time. Tournaments are quite often pushed for time. You know, you've only got the facilities for a certain amount of time, you need to get the games finished, you need a decent number of games, you know, usually around 3 a day, and dogfighting and, you know, all that sort of shenanigans is potentially going to add a bit of time to games that are already starting to take longer as we get more and more complicated rules and formation bonuses anyway. So that could be a reason, but also the requirement for space. If you're dogfighting, it does seem to imply you're using a separate surface. So, you know, are they going to have to start building their tables differently so we've got a separate space down the side for dogfighting? That's it's going to be a bit of a nuisance, you know, if you own your own facility and have to build extra tables in the space you've got just to do dogfighting. That's could be a pain. And also a few issues on clarity of the rules. I mean, yeah, GW's rules don't have the best reputation for, you know, preciseness, should I say. You know, there are things that are questioned. Now, they are trying to rectify that with the new FAQs, but as far as I'm aware, there's no FAQs covering this yet. And you've got things like air superiority. Does that happen if there isn't a dogfight phase? Because technically, it's only a dogfight phase if both people have flyers. If one of you doesn't have flyers, then there's no dogfight phase. So technically, on rules as written, you don't get air superiority, although that seems a little silly because obviously if you've got flyers and your opponent hasn't, you have air superiority. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And also these attack patterns. They give layouts in the book, but they don't necessarily define the parameters of those. Like obviously 2 side by side, 4 to 6 inches apart, that makes sense. But what about when they're staggered? Do they have to be 45 degrees between them? Is it just one's ahead of the other? You know, it's a little bit tricky to see what their intention is. And rules as written, it's not clear. So how a tournament organizer is going to FAQ that so everyone's playing to the same rules. And finally, popularity. At this stage, I don't know how much people are going to like these rules. I mean, if they are truly compulsory and we have to use them, then we have to use them. But, you know, there are some tournaments out there that don't allow super heavies or that don't allow formations. So, you know, certainly is not without precedent for some tournaments to limit which rules you use. What I would say in the meantime, until this sort of pans out over time and we see what people are doing, is ask your tournament organizer before you go to the tournament. You know, check their rules packs. I'm certainly going to be having a few, having a bit of a chat with the guys who run the tournaments I regularly attend, just to find out how they're going to play this, because obviously I want to play by the rules and know what I'm up against. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Please do leave your comments down there. I'm really interested to hear what other members of the sort of the online gaming community or the wargaming community online are thinking about these. You know, is it as doom and gloom as I seem to think it is, or is there something I'm missing that I'm going to be really pleased to see, or are we just going to say, nah, not having these, stick with 7th ed until 8th ed comes out? I don't know. Let me know. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Sorry this has got a bit long, but I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.